Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to class. Today, of course, we are going to continue our discussions about pre-Columbian America. And of course, when we talk about pre-Columbian America, we're talking about obviously the time period before Christopher Columbus had come to America. So we're going to get into the cultures there. Yesterday, we talked about the Great Migration. We talked about we had reviewed and reiterated some things we talked about way at the beginning of the year about the migration patterns of man and how it is theorized that these people that were nomads, that were hunter-gatherers, followed the animal herds across this land bridge that had been formed because of the Ice Age. And they had crossed over from Siberia into Alaska and then migrated down and populated what we know today as North and South America. Now, of course, after that Ice Age receded, the temperatures went up, the ice melted and kind of washed away these land bridges. And those people kind of became lost, okay? And so we see, like we talked about yesterday, that cultures start developing independent from each other on two different sides of the world, okay? Now, there are going to be some things that I really want to, we had pointed out yesterday, but I really want to kind of reiterate now. That's going to be kind of an amazing deal, okay? We're going to see that even though these people are completely separated from each other and really and honestly have no way of contacting each other, have no connection to the people on the other side of the world, we are going to see that there are going to be some developments that are going to happen kind of at the same rate, whether they're in the Americas or whether they're over in the Eastern Hemisphere, where, Asia, Europe, Africa, and so forth, okay? So, for example, we had mentioned yesterday about the agricultural revolution, the Neolithic agricultural revolution, where basically we see that, yes, that shift from food gathering, hunter-gatherers, to food producing, farming and ranching, okay? That happened in the Eastern Hemisphere and it happened in the Western Hemisphere. It happened independent of each other. So basically some people had the ideas on either side and they started these processes of raising their own plants and raising their own animals, okay? Same thing that we see over in the other half of the world. Now, the other thing that we kind of mentioned yesterday that we see that is going to be developed and is going to be independent of each other, yet it's going to be very, very similar, is the concept of religion, okay? Now, stay with me when I mention this, because, we talked yesterday about how the natives in North America, and really all the Americas, they believed in more nature-based spirits, okay? They believed in gods and good spirits and evil spirits and things like that. Well, their religion that was practiced by the Native Americans is not too far off of the religions that were practiced in Mesopotamia and Sumer, is not too far off of the Egyptian gods or the Greek gods even, okay, where they were polytheistic. They believed that their gods were responsible for occurrences in nature and things like that. So again, two very major milestones of civilization, and they both developed independent of each other, okay? And now the third one is also going to be buildings. Now, we didn't really see it as much yesterday, but we will definitely see it today. But a lot of these cultures that are going to become pyramid builders, okay? Well, we, of course, have talked about the pyramids over there in Egypt, and we have talked about, like, the ziggurats in Mesopotamia and Sumer. Well, and even the buildings that were built in China and buildings that were built in India, they're going to be very similar to some of the pyramids and some of the buildings that are going to be constructed in Central America, okay, and South America. And again, these are people that have zero connection to each other, yet they're constructing things that look almost identical. Their beliefs in religion are almost identical. Their shift from food gathering to food producing is going to be almost identical. So it's kind of like one of these great coincidences of history that this happened. Now, of course, this, like I mentioned yesterday, this also leads to a lot of these conspiracy theorists that talk about aliens and talk about, people that travel from place to place or time travelers or things like that. And again, that's all the kind of crazy stuff that it's kind of interesting to look at, but obviously it's not based on any kind of history. But again, it's kind of like one of those crazy kind of things from history that, again, people that had no connection with each other at all, yet they develop they've developed kind of the same on either end. Okay. Now, the other thing we're going to get into in this chapter is going to also be the age of exploration. We will talk about when, and like I said it yesterday, and it is still true today. Okay. In 2022, we look back at this and we don't really see it as being a big landmark thing, because guess what? Ever since you've been in elementary school, I'm sure you've learned about Columbus. I'm sure you've learned about Native Americans. I'm sure you've learned about all these things that we're going to be getting into. But understand, like in a world view, kind of looking through all of history all at once, this voyage of Columbus, the western half of our world becoming aware of the eastern half of our world, and vice versa, is going to be perhaps the most significant thing that's ever going to happen in history. It really is. Okay, it's going to be one of the most landmark moments in all of our history. Okay, we of course talked about like during the Renaissance that the invention of the printing press was this landmark invention that really propelled us into modern times. Well, understand the fact that that North America and South America were pretty much discovered by the people in the Eastern Hemisphere. That is going to be, like I said, one of the biggest things that's ever going to happen. It's going to make major changes throughout our entire history. Now, the only thing that would be even close, like I said, is if all of a sudden, like an alien landed outside and we became aware of alien life. Okay, that's about what this compares to on scale of how big this really was for history. Okay, so keep all that stuff in mind as we get going. So let's go ahead and get ourselves locked into today's material here. So, oops, lost that. Hang on a second, guys. Hang on one second, everybody. Get our PowerPoint back up. For some reason, it turned off. There it is. One second, guys. Sorry about that. All right, long PowerPoint. See, there's like 1,200 slides on it. Just bear with me for just a second. Let me get back to where we were. All right. All right. So now we're back where we left off. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Okay, so of course we talked about the natives of North America. We talked about, of course, the natives that lived in the north. We talked about the natives from the Pacific Northwest. We talked about the Southwest. We talked about the people that lived along the East Coast of America. We talked about the Plains Indians that lived in the central portion of our country. But the big thing that I want us to remember when we talked about the natives of North America is that it's going to be very diverse because the climates are so different. The climates are so varied all throughout North America. So we're going to see lots of different cultures going to emerge. Lots of different people are going to live there. So yesterday we really didn't talk about specific native tribes. We just kind of talked about in general because, of course, there were thousands of different natives groups that lived all throughout America, North America. Now, as you move yourself down into Central America, however, we're going to see that there's going to be more large civilizations, okay? And an example of that is going to be today. Now, we're going to talk specifically today about the Olmec, Toltec, and Maya civilization, okay? And then we will probably cut it off and we'll get into the Aztec tomorrow because, again, we're going to have a shorter class period today. So what we're going to see is, of course, in Central America down here, of course, you can see it goes down kind of in this isthmus, okay? Now, when we talk about isthmus, or what an isthmus is a strip of land that connects two larger pieces of land. So this strip of land that goes right down through here that connects North America into South America is really this area that we refer to as Central America, okay? Now, on this land, we see that a civilization is going to emerge that's going to become kind of the dominant of the group. Now, at first, the first major civilization that's going to emerge around here is going to be the Olmec. Now we can see the Olmec indicated by this red line up here. It's kind of a smaller little chunk of land, but they're going to be all there along the coast. And we're going to see they're going to be kind of the first major civilization. Now, there is going to be a lot of different smaller tribes, lesser tribes around, but the Olmec will be the dominant group, okay? And they are going to, they're going to come in, they're going to kind of be the first kind of major tribe there. But again, as far as we're concerned, we're not going to really focus on them a lot because, of course, they come along and then they kind of die out, okay? And then after the Olmec, you're going to have the Toltec. Now, if we look at this again, we look at this map, you can see that yellow line that goes around a little bit further out from where the Olmec was. This is the Toltec. The Toltec will then become the dominant group of this area. Okay, they will kind of overtake the Olmec. They will kind of carry the torch or kind of carry on as being the civilization. And as you see, because we're talking about this area that is taken in by this yellow line there, they are going to absorb in a lot of these smaller tribes, these smaller groups, all to kind of being their group, okay? So this gives them more power. This makes them more significant, obviously, in this area. Now, of course, the Olmec and the Toltec will be completely outdone by the next major group that comes along and comes to dominance. And this is the one that we are going to focus on more today than anybody else, and that is going to be the Mayan civilization. Now, when we look at this map, we see that the Maya are going to be right down here. They're going to be in present-day Guatemala, and they're going to be where that kind of yellow mustard color is right there, is where the Mayan civilization is going to be. Now, at first, the Mayan civilization is going to be down here in the south, and then as time goes on, they will start migrating and moving up north into this Yucatan Peninsula and taking over all the land up there. Now, for example, when we see the Yucatan Peninsula right there, of course, places like Chichen Itza, places, this land is going to become very significant. Of course, we'll look at why Chichen Itza is important in just a little bit. I know that if anybody's ever been like on a cruise or been down on their vacation, you can always go kind of tour these pyramids. Chichen Itza is going to be some of those places that you can kind of tour through and go see. So this is really the area that we're going to be focusing on, or the group that we're going to be focusing on today more so than anything. Now, when it comes to the Maya, all right, of course, the Mayan civilization is going to be obviously bigger and stronger than we saw the Toltec and the Olmec, okay? Now, their society is going to be broken into pretty strict social classes, okay? And you can see kind of some examples of what some of these Mayan social classes would be. So, of course, you had just kind of your regular man and woman, okay? And yes, there were lots of peasants there. They lived in these thatched roofs, kind of mud huts. They were peasants. They were farmers. They were just kind of your average everyday people. And again, when we talk about societal structure, guys, this is going to be a pretty similar societal structure than we've seen in other societies that were, again, independent of the Maya, okay? We didn't really see like just kind of like your peasants and warrior class and different class that we see in other tribes in North America, like we see it with the Maya. But we saw it in places like, again, Mesopotamia and Sumer. We saw it in Egypt. We saw it in Greece. Same kind of stuff. So your regular guy here is going to be, again, farmer. He's going to be, probably not very, not very wealthy. Just kind of living a quiet, humble life. Okay, man, woman, kind of the same thing. Now, you were also going to have this warrior class that comes along. All right, and a lot like the knights, a lot like the samurai that we had talked about before. Not just anybody can become a warrior. You had to be like the son of a warrior. You had to be in the family of a warrior in order for you to become a warrior, just like your father was, or grandfather, or whatever was before you. Okay, it wasn't just a regular person. So again, this warrior class, again, similar to the samurai, similar to the knights that we had talked about before. Okay, then you've got your priests. Okay, now these priests, they are going to be these guys that claim to be kind of in tune with those spirits and in tune with the gods. Okay, now their gods are going to be very similar to what we talked about with the natives of North America. They will believe in multiple gods. The priests believe that they could read these gods. They could interpret what the gods wanted, and so that kind of gave them this cloud. Again, very similar to Mesopotamia and Sumer, very similar to Greece, very similar to Egypt. Okay, so again, independent of one another. Now, the king you see on the end. Now, there are going to be multiple Mayan cities, okay, all through that land that we talked about, that Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, and all that. And in that area, there are going to be multiple cities that all have a king, okay? So it's not at first, it's not going to be one king that kind of rules over everything. There are going to be multiple kings all throughout these smaller cities. Now, the bigger the city, the more important the king was, the more prosperous the king was, okay, more powerful the king was. Now, the thing about this is that in order to be the king of the Maya, all right, you were viewed, again, we're looking just like it was in Egypt, again, independent of each other, but yet still have the same idea. Just like in Egypt, they are going to see the king as being a half man and half God. So when the king says something, you must listen, you must follow, because again, they are part God. They are these perfect beings. We must listen to what they say. They are all wise, all knowing, all of that. Okay. So of course, this gives this title of king as a very, puts them in a very prestigious position. Okay. So again, societal structure, not different than what we saw in the other half of the world. Again, kind of those amazing coincidences that they did this pretty much the same thing that we saw over there. Now, when it came to the Maya, okay, they are also going to be extremely advanced. Okay, they are going to make huge strides in things like science, technology, mathematics, astronomy. Okay, they are going to also be these expert builders, and we'll look at the buildings that they're able to construct in just a little bit. But when it comes to mathematics and again astrology and astronomy and looking at the stars, the Maya are going to start constructing things like this. Now, we look at this and we might say, well, what in the world is this? Looks like just a piece of art. I'm sure a lot of y'all, you probably seen little pieces like this or the carvings or something like that. But what you see right here is a very detailed Mayan calendar, okay? I know we would look at this and say, well, how in the world is that a calendar? Well, this is the Mayan calendar. They were able to use mathematics. They were able to chart the movements of the sun and the moon and to chart out what days were. And they had a very accurate calendar. I mean, their calendar was right at about 365 days. It's not the exact amount. I mean, we know that we kind of measure our years in 365 and a quarter days. That's why every 4 years we have that leap year day that throws in. But this was an extremely accurate calendar. Now, by using this, they have predicted the years out all the way up until 2012. And that's why the reason why I say 2012 is because there were a lot of people around that said that the Maya could use this calendar to predict the future. They, of course, a lot of people come in and say, yeah, they saw events that took place, but their calendar stops. I think it was on like December 12th, if I'm not mistaken, 2012 or December or something, 2012. And they said that when that happens, the end of the world will happen. They predicted that the world will end in 2012. And I remember when 2012 came by, obviously it's 2022 now, that's 10 years ago, and obviously the world did not end. But I remember, I was working at Madison, I was coaching at Madison, and I remember like the exact moment that the world was supposed to end. I remember we were like in athletics, and I remember all the coaches were sitting there, and we kind of stopped and we waited, and then like nothing happened, and we're like, all right, keep lifting, we're good. But it's kind of a funny thing, but simply people believe that yes, the Mayans like predicted the future and said the world was going to end on that day, but literally it was probably just the fact that their calendar ran out of space at that point. But again, you look at a culture that is before Columbus, and they were able to use mathematics. They were able to use, obviously the movement of the stars, their calendar to predict out the future. They could make a calendar that went hundreds of years into the future, all based on what they had observed back then. So again, that also shows you how advanced they really were. Okay. Now, also when it comes to the Maya, we're going to see that they're going to be obviously going to be known for a lot of things, but one of the things they will be known for is this sport that they are going to invent. Okay. Now, before I kind of get into the sport, just know that when it came to, again, religion, they were very, very big into religion. They were very, very in tune with the spirits and the gods. And of course, we see these kings as being gods. Well, what they would do is they would have this sport that they would play. And this sport was like a combination of like soccer, football, and basketball. Okay. Basically, what they would do is they would get this round rubber ball. It's probably about as big of a softball, maybe a little bit bigger than a softball. And of course, it was made out of rubber. It would bounce around quite a bit. And these guys would get all dressed up in these big fancy clothes. And their goal is they were trying to get that ball to go through that hoop, that sideways hoop. But they couldn't throw it. They had to like bounce it off their elbow. They had to kick it. They had to like knee it up there, bounce it off their hip. But they couldn't use their hands, kind of like soccer. And the goal was that they would basically be fighting it out, doing everything they could to get that ball to go through that hoop. Now, once it went to the hoop, one team was declared the winner, the other team was declared the loser. Okay. Now, these competitions were hardcore. I mean, these guys would go in, they would like beat the crap out of each other. I mean, and of course, people would show up and they would watch, but they saw these events. They started associating these events with the gods. And they started seeing these sporting events as being like predictors of the future or battles or whatnot. Well, these teams, much like the sports teams we have today, would represent all these individual cities, these Mayan cities, and they would show up in a central location and have these competitions. Now, usually once a year, they would have like, I guess you can see like the championship game or like the big game was always coincided with this big religious festival. And they would play this game. Now imagine this, if you will, playing a game like this, okay? And if you won, you would be celebrated. You'd go to like these big feasts and you would have all this food and you would drink and you would party and do other stuff. Well, if you lost this competition, okay, they would take the losing team and they would literally sacrifice them to the gods. So imagine having that as the stakes of playing a game, that if you lose, you're literally going to be killed. You're going to be executed and sacrificed to the gods. Now, the Maya, just like the Aztec will be that we'll talk about tomorrow, are going to be sun worshipers, okay? They believe, and the Aztec more so than the Maya, but they believed that the sun was a god that had to make this journey across the sky every day. And the god and the sun god was in constant battle with darkness. So when the sun was out, it would fight and fight and fight and fight, and then darkness would come along and it would like reign supreme. Well, their belief was that you had to make a human sacrifice because the sun god needed human blood to come back and fight back the darkness. So every day when that sun came up, they believed that the god had been satisfied by blood sacrifices overnight and now has the energy to go across the sun, go across the sky again. So yes, the Maya definitely participated in human sacrifices when it came to their religion, when it came to appeasing their gods. Okay, now, was the sun going to come up whether they killed somebody or not? Yes, it probably was going to come up, but not to them. They believed that that was required for the sun to make that journey across the sky again. So when we talk about sacrificing a team like this or just killing people at random, that was very common for the Maya. It will become even more common for the Aztec, and we'll get into that a lot more in detail tomorrow when we talk about the Aztec, but just know that the Maya were doing the exact same thing, okay? Now, of course, these ceremonies were done in pyramids that look very similar to this right here, okay? Now, these are the pyramids there at Chichen Itza, okay? There are a lot of kind of peculiarities of these pyramids, okay? So, for example, there's lots of them if you were to happen to go there, but just know that you know, there's all kind of little discrepancies, like the steps, for example. These are all these steps that lead up to the top. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's 365 steps to get to the top, just like the amount of days in a year. They also have these pyramids laid out in a design or laid out the same way that the stars, I think it's the stars and maybe Orion's belt, if I'm not mistaken, are laid out in the sky. They have the pyramids laid out the same way, okay? So again, we talk about conspiracy theories and this and that. Well, at the same time, you look at these pyramids, and these pyramids are not too far off of what we saw in Egypt. They are very similar to what we were seeing in the Mesopotamian Sumer, and these are almost identical to pyramids that were being built in Southeast Asia, okay? So very, very similar to these pyramids, but they would use these pyramids for religious purposes, okay? So up on top, they would have these sacrifices taking place. They would have these priests that would live up on the top there that were praying to gods, again, to try to get the sun god to get energy to go across the sky again. So again, a huge religious significance that we see in these pyramids back at this time, okay? Moving forward, let's see here. Okay, oh, actually, we'll get to that tomorrow. Okay, so because we have a shorter class period today, that is actually, we're gonna hold off. We got about 5 minutes or so left, so you guys can relax, and we'll be out of here in just a few minutes.